I actually have some serious concerns about this announcement, and I hate to sort of not go along with everybody's sort of um, excitement and happiness exclusively. I think there's some serious issues, but there isn't time to get into those right now. I'll be doing that at some point, but I do want to ask while we've got Ted here. You talk about people being able to submit papers. You talk about the organization staying neutral. So that means that the organization won't officially say whether a plane hit the Pentagon or didn't. But what I want to know is what opportunities are there for people? Let's just say I wanted to write a paper, sort of putting together my evidence or the evidence that I think is important regarding the Pentagon, and I want to submit it to your organization. How is it going to get past somebody like one of your board members, David Chandler, who has a very strong position on this and has been basically kind of, backing the majority of the official story on the question for quite a number of years? How am I going to get my voice in there if I want to submit something?
Well asked, very civilly asked.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I tried to muster that up. Yes.
All right. Yeah. So Craig, I talked about the Debated Topics Forum, which is going to be the main venue where that topic can be discussed. The purpose of the Debated Topics Forum is that it is lightly moderated, essentially to make sure that what's written in papers is like civil and respectful, and that it's in like English that can be understood, basically, and let's say coherent thoughts and arguments on paper. That's pretty much the threshold to be published in the Debated Topics Forum. So there's not going to be anybody. The idea is that nobody is refereeing or peer reviewing and deciding what should or shouldn't be published. And then to be very frank about it, the person who's going to review it just for meeting those basic thresholds is James Gorley, who personally he does not have a position on what did or did not at the Pentagon. He has
really?
not. To my knowledge, he doesn't. If he does,
that's news to me. I thought he did.
If he does have it, I don't think that disqualifies him anyway from serving the purpose of just reviewing the papers, for these minimal requirements. The goal of the forum is to be a place for people who disagree to discuss the topic directly and to have to respond to each other if they and so the idea is that if somebody writes a paper, whether it's you or whether it's David or somebody else, that anybody else can respond.
Here we are again for part 2 of the critique of the International Center for 9/11 Justice, headed by Ted Walter and his organization, which consists of a number of individuals who have questionable backgrounds. Anyway, we're going to talk about point bulletin number 2, the phone calls. So as you can see here, we're going to go to their site and we're going to read together. Remember, 10 reasons the official account of 9/11 is impossible. Reason number 2, the phone calls. It is impossible that more than a dozen cell phone calls allegedly made by passengers and flight attendants on the 4 airlines took place as reported by the media in the first few years after 9/11. It wasn't the media that reported, it was what actually happened. Loved ones received calls from people on the plane. Thus, media interviewed these people. In nearly all cases, the airlines were too high for cell phone calls to go through. That's already false. Some calls made below 5,000. Apparently recognizing this problem, the FBI unveiled a new story during the 2006 trial of Zacarias Moussaoui, claiming that all of the calls, except for 2 allegedly made at a low altitude of 5,000 feet, were made from seatback phones. However, in the case of 2 passengers, whom the FBI now alleged made calls from seatback phones, there was good evidence that the calls were made from the passenger's cell phones. In the case of United Airlines 175 passenger Brian Sweeney, he left a message on the answering machine at his home, and his wife reported apparently based on the information from the answer machine that he called from his cell phone. In the case of Flight 93 passenger Tom Burnett, his wife was interviewed by the FBI just hours after receiving multiple calls from him, which she reported were made from his cell phone. As stated in the FBI report, that interview, Burnett was able to determine that her husband was using his own cell phone because the caller identification showed his number, that number there. Flight 93 was allegedly at 35,000 feet and 40,000 feet, respectively, at the time of two Burnett's calls, altitudes that would have made the calls impossible. Furthermore, regarding the two lone calls claimed by the FBI to have made from cell phones at 5,000 feet, allegedly placed by United 93 flight attendant C.C. Lyles and Flight 93 passenger Edward Felt, it is unlikely that even these two calls could have been completed at that altitude. Ultimately, while perhaps difficult to fathom, the evidence points to the phone calls somehow having been faked. Recommends sources of study the 9/11 consensus panel. Let's take a look at who's on this panel that says or claims that the phone calls are fake, right? Rob Bowman, right? He's dead now. So David Chandler, not a denier of phone calls. This guy, an Italian journalist, he's dead now. Jonathan Cole, Dwayne Dietz. Dwayne Dietz once believed that the planes didn't hit the Pentagon Shankill. He reversed that, and now the no-planers are attacking him. And he used to work in NASA. Todd Fletcher, we could pass him by. He's a nut job. Dr. Daniel Ganser. Lieutenant Colonel David Gapp. Niels Harrod. Stephen Jones. Ralph Kolstad. Come on. No planer, and he's a pilot. Not for any commercial airliner. Graham McQueen is dead. Massimo Mazzucco. Dennis McMahon. Aidan Monahan. I've heard of him. Roland Morgan. Frank Sure I like. Lou Stolzenberg. Daniel St. John. My God. Look about the bomb in the barrel. Tony Zambotti. I've heard of him. Dr. Matthew Witt. And Jonathan Weisbach. I don't know most of these people. These are probably dealing with physics. But some of those people, woof. Okay, so we're off to a hot start. First it was the hijacker. First it was the hijackers, and now it's, the phone calls made by the people on the plane. I mean, give me a break, man. Holy cow. All right, so, I like to go to the source of people who know what they're talking about and not some people like Daniel Sunjata or Elizabeth Woodward or David Ray Griffin or Massimo Mazzucco. My God. So John Sheehan, who's the Radio Technician Commission for Aerodynamics, once said in an article, which I'll link in the description, and I'll read you the quote, the airlines are misleading the traveling public. John Sheehan, who headed the Radio Technical Commission for Aeronautics Study in 2006, said that he has often used his own cell phone in the sky. There is no real connection between cell phone frequencies and the frequencies of the navigation or communication systems, end quote. And as for why some cell phone calls didn't show up on the bill of their phone call, like some truth to say that, Barbara Olson's FBI log trial didn't show the number, it showed blank. Well, according to Bentley Alexander, who's a senior engineer at AT&T, he basically said in an article in 1999 in Wall Street Journal, that's 2 years prior to 9/11, quote, cell signal from the air is also especially strong, since it is unimpeded by buildings or other ground clutter. That often means it could jump on a frequency already in use on the ground, causing interruptions or hangups. And airborne cell phones are sometimes free because the signal is moving so fast between cells that the software on the ground has difficulty recording the call, says Bentley Alexander, end quote. I also did a video which shows that the cell towers did indeed get the call from Olson on the phone, and actually they were collect calls. She actually used her credit card to make these calls. And a lot of these calls went through the secretary. And since the collect calls going through an operator, there is no specific number. That's why it shows is blank. But I identified the times and places of where those phone calls were made and synchronized them. So I'll link that video in the bottom of the screen for you to check it out. Now, there was a study conducted in 2001 that found that even on international flights, that many airlines reported cell phones that were being used at even high altitudes due to the airlines on board using cell base stations, which are not in use today. And I'll link you to that too. It's in the PDF. The GCAA received reports that 2 air carriers that have airplanes equipped with onboard cell phone base stations. The 2 air carriers reported millions of cell phone turn-ons, where the onboard cell telephone base station recognizes an appropriate cell phone being activated on board that plane. Now, plus, in their overall findings, the Federal Aviation Administration found cell phones can work in flight, but at the direction of the airline carrier's ability to maintain connections with towers on board and on the ground so that there's a good connection. Now, in the case of Flight 93, they weren't flying over the ocean or on the river like Flight 11 and 175 were. They were flying over a total city, Virginia, Pennsylvania, where the phone calls can work between the cell towers. And in that article, it says, quote, these aviation authorities reported the use of cell phones on aircraft where airborne is restricted by telecommunications authority regulations. Operators of aircraft with onboard cell phone base stations must have approval from telecommunication authorities before these systems can be used by passengers with their cell phones, end quote. So if you're talking about, oh, American Airlines got rid of their in-house phone. Well, that's not true. American Airlines domestic flights had airphones discontinued on March 31st, 2002. And according to an Orlando Sentinel article, I'll read you the quote. As of March 31st, 2002, the world's largest airline will no longer have AT&T wireless phones on 654 of its planes used on domestic flights. Only its Boeing 777s and 767-300s, which are used mainly for international flights, and they'll keep the service. So when you rely on people who already want to find a conspiracy to contradict the official narrative, which is what the 9/11 consensus panel did, and these are the same people that once said no plane hit the Pentagon. There wasn't a plane crash in Shanksville. When you already have a preconceived mindset before you investigate anything, you're only going to look at information that acquiesces to that mindset. So in other words, you aren't looking at it like an independent investigator would. So my problem with Ted Walter and his group is point number 2, cell phones are nothing based on the critiques of people who already are looking for anomalies, which are disproven, based upon what? A misreading of the 9/11 Commission report, a misreading of the FBI interviews of family members. CeCe Lyle's husband got a call from his wife, who you're saying didn't happen, and you're saying that the phone calls are fake. All right, so now you're saying there had to have been voice morphing. Well, guess what? Even the founder of voice morphing disagrees with you. Dr. George Papgun is the founder of voice morphing, and he basically says that you have no bearing or no standing to use voice morphing because it's impossible to do it. You would have to sit next to the person as he's speaking. So is George Papgun on any of these hijacked flights? No. So voice morphing is out of the question. And now, Ted Walter, with points number 1 and number 2 already refuted, you basically have a problem on your hand. Now, what are you? Are you just an extension of the 9/11 consensus panel? Are you an extension of Truth Action Project? Are you an extension of Pilots for 9/11 Truth and all the other people that basically make these outrageous claims and basically are not available for debate or even legitimate? All these people I just mentioned and all these organizations, they're defunct or they're basically on their way out. They're not in court. They're not doing anything productive. They're repeating the same old mantra time and time again. 22 years out now. And what do you have? Nothing. So, in essence, from the evidence I provided to you, which is going to be available to you in the description, cell phones have been proven to work even at high altitudes through the airline's own base stations. While airphones were discontinued on American Airlines on March 31st of 2002, this should refute any theories pushed by the likes of Pilots for 9/11 Truth, which are defunct, or the late David Ray Griffin, or Christopher Bolin, or Rebecca Roth, or Jason Burmis, or Alex Jones, or Jim Fetzer, or Barbara Honegger, or Massimo Mazzucco, and I can name you a dozen more. All those people have basically never been in a court, never been in a field of a debate, one-on-one with somebody who knows what they're talking about. None of these people are active in street activism or even online activism. None of these people have an established channel or are respected by those involved intimately with the attacks of September 11, 2001. So my advice to you, Ted Walter, is this. You better start making some very tough decisions, or else you're going to be late to the party and no one's going to show up and no one's going to care what you have to say, because everything that you're basically talking about has been talked about ad nauseum for the last 22 years, and nobody gave them any attention or treated them with an ounce of respect, because these are illegitimate arguments. So I'll see you in the next video when we go to the last point, point number 3.